So I was wanting to get this done sooner, but I just ended up with so much work piled up and didn't have time, so we'll get this done now before the tournament is over. I had a strange feeling I wasn't really going to care about this one as much as I did the last year was one, but like the last tournament I had a good feeling, this time I had a bad one, and seeing as to what looks to be the final 2 matchups are ones that I don't personally have that much interest in, I guess I was proven right in that regard. 9 weeks advanced prophesizing right there. Anyway, we got 32 matches, with 31 of them being new ones, so let's talk about them 1 week at a time and how I felt. If you're wondering, I drew all of these things you see on screen in my horrible, disgusting goblin art style, organized into groups of 4 by the weeks they were in, and this format and all was inspired by Larrywinwood's work. I'll link his YouTube and platform formerly known as Twitter in the description, so please check it out.
While you're down there, there's actually something else in the description that's linked to this video's sponsor, G Fuel. I don't have the most amount of time to get this done, so you're just gonna have to look at my gorgeous pumpkin face this whole time. And if you don't like that, then you're wrong. G Fuel is your cheat code in a can. Bottle in this case. A 0 calorie, 0 carbs, 0 sugar energy formula made from plant-based ingredients, available in a variety of 50 flavors, loaded with antioxidants and vitamins, as well as caffeine, so make sure you drink responsibly and only if you're over the age of 18. Available in cans and in tubs, G Fuel is great for being an epic gamer like me, seen here celebrating the victory of Sans versus the Judge in week 9 of the Tournament of Champions. Click the link in the description and use code BLOODREICH, spelt the way it's spelled, for 20% off your order. Please support the channel and remember to drink responsibly, and safely, like me, through this straw, while trying out the Pewds flavor. Indeed, I'm going to suck the life juices of PewDiePie that have been blended into this cup. That's actually pretty good. That's actually better than I thought it'd be. I mean, I didn't really know what to expect with a flavor called Pewds. Oh, you just skipped the ad read, huh? You just skipped it. That's so irresponsible of you. Do you want me to not make enough money to stay stable and keep making videos? Nah, I'm jostling. I always skip the ad reads too.
So let's start with week 1. I don't have the most time to work on this. I'm kind of waiting on Doctor vs. Rick to come out so I can get the review on that done, but I've also got a few other meaty projects I'm working on. The editing won't be super up to snuff, and I do apologize, but hey, you're here for opinions, not embellishments. Week 1 began with the protagonist of the Owl House from the Owl House vs. Anne from Amphibia, Monokuma from Danganronpa vs. Koro Sensei from Assassination Classroom, Shulk from Xenoblade vs. Lightning from Final Fantasy, and Katsuni Baraki from Touhou Project vs. Fleetway Sonic from Sonic the Comic. The protagonist of Owl House vs. Anne solidly comes in as being a matchup I don't personally care for, but a lot of people I know really like it. I'm not as starved for Western animation representation in Death Battle anymore, what with this season having Stitch, Bill Cipher, Discord, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Scooby-Doo, and Rick Sanchez at least, but the novelty is still sort of there, so that does aid it. To my knowledge, the theme for them is them being Western-originated magical girls, though I've heard that's not the best term for them, who isekai'd their way into another world, and they're both from sister series that exist within the same multiverse. Something like that. It's good enough for me. I think the connection to them, like the sister series thing, is the big selling point. Rivalry matchups are always the coolest to me. So this was easily my second choice vote on this poll. Not a matchup I personally care for, but plenty of people I know do, and that's good enough. The second matchup, however, Koro Sensei vs. Monokuma, is hands down my favorite matchup in the entire Tournament of Champions, with minimal competition. Monokuma is a great little shit of a villain, and Koro Sensei might just be my favorite character except for Godzilla and maybe Optimus Primal in this entire lineup. He is amazing. I've gone in depth on this matchup before in other videos, with these two mostly just heavily contrasting one another. They're both perma-smiling speedster teachers in a school of death, with the contrast that Koro Sensei is actually a good teacher who is teaching his students assassination techniques to further their abilities, while not promoting them to kill others, while Monokuma is a monster who isn't teaching shit, but is promoting the idea of them killing one another. With a cool theme, cool animation potential, especially with the Monokuma army considered, and two characters I really like, this is a goated matchup that I was happy to see win this round. Shulk vs. Lightning was an easy bottom tier pick for me. I have no connection to Shulk, though not from lack of trying. Before the Wii U ever came out, I was scrambling for a copy of Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii, but never was able to find it anywhere. Never got a Wii U, so I kind of skipped that one, and have now only recently gotten the Switch. I don't want to just get Xenoblade 3, but that's all that is around anymore. I have to go looking for the other games, and they're not available anywhere. And I don't tend to like buying digital copies of things. Shulk looks cool, and has a variety of really cool swords. That is my only connection to him. Lightning, meanwhile, is my second least favorite protagonist across all of Final Fantasy. Here's my list, by the way. I've played at least a little bit of all these games, not 11 and 14 though, because I don't really like MMORPGs that much. Lightning is one of the most boring and droll characters we've ever had, only really surpassed by Vaan, because at least Lightning doesn't feel like a secondary character in her own story. She's way better than Vaan. She's flat, unexpressive, and doesn't change as a character. I really couldn't be fucked to care about her or her game, and she gets worse the more the games go along. And like, Final Fantasy 13 is a game that plays itself, and is all corridors. I remember my dad played further than I did, and he got to a boss, and then just left it to autoplay itself while we all went out to eat lunch with friends. When we came back, it was still going, nothing had happened. Eventually, the game did beat itself though. It's a miserable game to play is a strong word, a miserable story to experience, and a miserable character to see it through with. The only props I give Lightning are design-wise. As the first female protagonist, and only one even to this day in the main series, it's hilarious that one of the main parts of her design was to stray away from the extreme femininity of past characters, according to Square Enix. It's really funny, the only female protagonist so far is also one of the only ones that doesn't have an especially feminine design. That's neat. Aside from that, fuck off, I hate her. I think Shulk deserves a matchup against a character that's good, unless he's just as dog shit as her, in which case they can feel free to fight one another. The theme is science, fantasy, JRPG swordsman, and that's it. Boring matchup, least favorite of the four. Cassini Baraki vs Sonic then, I am lost on this one. I don't know the theme, I don't know anybody even slightly interested in the matchup, and I don't really care to see either combatant. Toho Project I'm not dying for in Death Battle unless it's Regal Nightbug, and with us getting 3 Sonic episodes already, and only 3 episodes using the Sonic franchise overall that weren't with a hedgehog, I'm really not begging for him to come back even if Fleetway Sonic has his differences. Despite how much I'd be up for alternate versions of characters getting episodes, because like, 2 of our biggest examples of alt versions of characters in Death Battle are already Sonic characters from Cosmic comic books. This did get me excited a bit though, because Cassin is a character that I didn't know or recognize at all. I was quite hyped to see more characters I never would have expected that I also didn't recognize in this tournament. She was the only one. So that was the first week. One matchup I really cared about, one my friends cared about, one I don't have any strong feelings on, and one I dislike. Moving on to week 2, we had Gru from Despicable Me vs Megamind in the movie of the same name, Greek mythology's Zeus vs Norse mythology's Odin, Little Mac from Punch-Out vs Makinoichi Ippo from Majime no Ippo, and Peacemaker from DC vs Soldier Boy from Amazon Originals The Boys. What a banger opening. Gru vs Megamind is pretty handily my second favorite matchup in this entire Tournament of Champions. I love Megamind, I quite like the first Despicable Me, and the shared rivalry and theme of the matchup works for me. If you need me to explain this matchup, then you haven't seen either movie and you should just go watch both movies. I love this matchup, I was really hoping he'd win against Tom vs Wily in the first semi-final, but hey, it didn't. I guess I'm not too bothered. That was mostly because the crowd voting for Tom Wily tended to be slightly more obnoxious than the crowd going against it. Between them, I'm not fussed. I have more connection to this one, but I was okay with Tom Cat vs Wily winning too. I've talked about this matchup before and I still love it. I have really fallen off Zeus vs Odin though. I have sort of really had to come to realize the complete lack of reverence and care that the majority of this community has towards topics like mythology. I guess I didn't notice from just the fact that everyone talked about it no differently to any other fictional series, but like, this is stuff that I've loved since I was a boy, and while making jokes and funnies with it doesn't bother me, the lengths to which people will go to justify their own insensitivity is disgusting. I've had many people just openly and freely talk about how they're okay and fine with the trivialization of Native American beliefs still followed today, and more personally, Chinese religions that are still followed to this day, and it disgusts me. While Abrahamic beliefs and if you're lucky Hinduist ones are treated with the respect of not to be used, people will openly use other widely worshipped beliefs with no care for how people who follow those feel. Oftentimes not even out of ignorance, but out of a lack of caring if it offends people. I don't think people get that these aren't just things that their believers are fans of. A Buddhist is not just a fan of Buddhism the way you're a fan of fucking Marvel. These are things that they live the majority, if not entirety of their lives devoting themselves to. These aren't just characters, these are sacred things that are of the utmost importance to people and should be respected. This lack of respect has turned me off any mythology matchups. I genuinely don't think the majority of people who campaign for them deserve the recognition of getting what they want, because they campaign for things in harmful and disrespectful ways that most others don't even realize are disrespectful. There is minimal inherently offensive about specifically Zeus vs Odin, but it's still letting these people know that they will get rewarded for their awful bullshit. Alongside that, I do actually have a friend close enough to be considered akin to a brother to me, who I've known for more than half my life, who does strongly hold beliefs towards Germanic pagan deities such as Odin. So to me personally, this is also a bit awkward in that regard. But even with that ignored, I don't want people who have been intentionally somewhat racist towards me as a man of Chinese descent by telling me that whether or not I'm offended by the usage of my culture in such trivial ways doesn't matter because the matchups are cool or thematic or whatever. I don't want those people to get rewarded in any way. I strongly stand against any mythology matchups getting on Death Battle in the future, which is not an easy thing for me to say as someone who adores anthropology to the extent I do. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that people are so open to be insensitive though. When I made a fucking post about the use of slurs in a comment section, there were so many people defending it and being like, hate speech is still free speech, or oh, who cares if there's slur used? And it's like, I'm a victim of racial bullying, and you're gonna go, it doesn't matter if slurs are used, they're just slurs, who cares? What the fuck is wrong with you? Lil Mac vs. Ippo is next. It's cool. I don't have many strong opinions on it beyond thinking it's cool, the aesthetic's cool, the fight could be cool. Easily my second choice pick for this quadrilogy, I think it'd be sick to see. Peacemaker vs. Soldier Boy then it's kinda whatever. I imagine they'd composite comics and live action to which Soldier Boy gets nothing and Peacemaker I think also gets nothing. So it'd kinda be a waste of time beyond making it actually debatable. And I'm talking about this from the perspective of like the base concept would be the TV show Soldier Boy and the DCEU Peacemaker, because like those are the popular ones, and like comics Soldier Boy is nothing. He's nothing. So like, if you were to composite them, the most you do is it would be probably debatable, because Peacemaker might get some street tier scaling that would not get completely washed by Homelander scaling. It's a cool enough matchup. I'd actually really like to see it as a live action episode if they were able to get someone with the beef to play a John Cena-esque role, or at least someone who's got like the extra padding of the suit would cover up the difference. Though, knowing John Cena, he'd also totally be willing to play it if they ask him, I'd imagine. Cool matchup more or less, I'm not against it. Week 3 gave us our only truly close vote in the opening rounds, giving us Ragnar the Blood Edge from BlazBlue vs Velvet Crow from Tales of Berseria. Is that how it's pronounced? I don't know. Sailor Moon from Sailor Moon vs Madoka Kaname from Puella Magi Madoka Magica, Scorpion from Mortal Kombat vs Wolf from Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, and Ryu vs Goku using all of their media. Ragnar vs Velvet is fine. I like Ragnar obviously, so that's up there, but I think the people who make their entire online personas a character they like don't understand how little Ragnar ranks on my overall list of favorite characters. Might not even be on there at all. I love his design. I think he's pretty underrated and overrated in unrelated ways. Like, people downplay how much of a actually good character he is and don't recognize that the edgelord thing is kind of a subversion because he's actually a huge dork. And his power is overplayed to shit because this guy gets jobbed every game. I don't have any opinions on Velvet or her game. It's a cool enough matchup, but nothing that really screams to me. Sailor Moon vs Madoka Kaname is one that similarly I'm not too crazy about, but it is the most wanted of a good friend of mine, importantly an Australian friend of mine, and we Aussies gotta stick together. So I did show my support for it, and that might have actually pushed it to get the victory in this round. Sorry, but hey, if Goku vs Ryu won, it would have been slaughtered in the semifinals anyway. It's a quintessential magical god matchup, and I like it decently. Scorpion vs Wolf is pretty cool. My preferred for Scorpion will always be Soul Calibur's Yoshimitsu, but this is still a crackin' matchup. Two ninja guys who done did a die and then stopped doing that. I believe that's the main theme. Probably some vengeance in there too. I never played Sekiro. It's cool. I like it. I think the aesthetic is really neat, and I think it'd be pretty neat to see Sekiro on Death Battle, because that's not a game I would have expected generally. Composite Ryu vs Composite Goku is also cool. I'm not as hyped for it as most because, frankly, I don't think Composite Goku is the most exciting. The main thing he gets of note is the 4D fusion thing, and when I say main thing he gets, I mean like not in terms of scaling, because mate, I couldn't care less if you buy Universal Jump Force or whatever. The 4D fusion thing is the main thing he gets outside of Xeno stuff, and like, you'd get that just from using Xeno Goku. Ryu though gets so much, like Power Rangers shit, Transformers shit, Fall Guys, shit coming out the wazoo, and that's cool. It's a cool matchup, but I'm not too strong about it. In fact, that's this whole round. Matchups that I like, but don't feel the strongest towards. I was in support of Madoka vs Usagi because of a friend of mine, and that's about as far as it goes. Week 4 gave us Luke from Star Wars vs Saber from Type Moon, apparently we've elected to call it, Wile E. Coyote from Looney Tunes vs Tomcat from Tom and Jerry, Hiccup and Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon vs Hero and Baymax from Hero 6, and Sackboy from Little Big Planet vs Maxwell from Scribblenauts. Aside from one, this set was repping some major bangers, and I showed support for the matchup that got 3rd place, so hopefully at least 5 people realize that my voice isn't as big as they think. Okay, so, Luke vs Saber. I loathe this matchup, at least as much as I can a versus matchup. People have harassed me endlessly over it, and there are other matchups. Combined with how much Fate in Versus has been bullied out of my interest, this matchup will produce a miserable waiting period for me and ruin my fortnight. As well as basically being a death battle, giving the people who make it their lives work to harass me exactly what they want for the 2nd time after Freezertron. I fucking despise everything about this matchup. I've seen the big defense post, and feel free to like it. Person who made that, if you're seeing this, I'm good for you. I'm glad you like it, and like, if it happens, I hope you enjoy it. But I really don't think people defending the connections realize that 90% of them are just in relation to King Arthur from actual Arthuriana. Like, yes, I know Arturia is based on King Arthur, but like, they're actually not that similar. So the fact that a matchup focused almost entirely on parts of the history of Arturia that is directly taken from King Arthur is really strange to me. Because like, Artoria is very similar to your quintessential idea of what Arthur's like, but he's really a lot more like a Nordic-style Celtic king than your traditional stuffy British king sort of archetype. A lot of the theming beyond that is stuff like they felt guilt over their past lives when they came back, which that's a lot of Fate servants share that with Artoria. And in her case, it's not even, like, as accurate, because, like, she was not aware of her faults when she first materialized. Luke, after his death, was fully aware of them, to my memory. The part that's special to Artoria is that it was a character flaw that led to her downfall. Saying that out loud, that's not that special, is it? Animation-wise, I don't really like it. People heralded Vader vs. Obito and now Luke vs. Saber as having great potential, but apparently Vader vs. Saber didn't, because Vader couldn't do any anime shit. What the fuck? By now, I don't like any of the matchups. Vader Obito is somehow my favorite of the three. You like the matchup if you want to. I know I'm shitting on it, but like, please don't let me stop you from liking it if you already do. If you're amongst the very large group of people who cannot avoid harassing me over and bothering me about it, please fuck off. But like, if you're just a fan who's pretty chill and doesn't care that someone dislikes it, that's good. And if you do care someone dislikes it, don't let it affect you too much. I don't think this matchup is at all interesting. What it brings for a fight is not nearly as thematically meaningful as I've seen people dance around, and it doesn't hit the notes I want for a matchup for either character. For Artoria, my ideal right now would be a matchup that focuses on the tragedy of her entire existence. She was orchestrated into being by the machinations of Merlin and Uther to serve a purpose, even though Merlin already knew that it would end in tragedy. She was raised as a farmer and knight, knowing fully well that she wasn't going to be ready to be suddenly thrust into the role of a king. As a king, she was less of a true charismatic noble king, the likes of Gilgamesh and Iskander, who inspired their people, but more of an emotionless killer who slaughtered the enemies of her people as a slave to their wants. She did everything for them, leaving behind a nation that relied so heavily on the facsimile of a king it had, that without her, it crumbled immediately. Artoria's entire life is tragic, and those who put her on that path knew fully well how it would end. She didn't realize any of this until long after her death, when finally actually meeting with and interacting with other kings and a master who is very similar to her. I think there are a lot of similarities between Kiritsugu and Artoria, just he didn't hide what he was, someone who killed anyone he had to for the sake of what he wanted to save. She broke down a realization of her existence, and that's something I'd want for a matchup with Artoria, something that matches that. For Luke, I want something that mostly just focuses on his major importance as a protagonist of one of the biggest, most important works in the history of science fiction media. Which is not to say I'm trying to trivialize who he is as a character, but his massive influence is way more than anything Artoria's had. And when focusing on theme of like what he is, I'd rather focus on a simple kid unaware of his heritage that gets brought into a war against an oppressive empire. Which, like, Artoria has elements of that, but it's not what speaks to me. The parts of the elements that are shared between them are not really emphasized the way I want for either character. That's where the matchup loses me. And the cunts who make it their life's work to harass me over it, which is a lot, you have no idea. The rest of the matchups this week are cool though. I don't have strong opinions on Wily vs Tomcat, but the idea of a fight where both characters are trying to kill each other but mostly just end up hurting themselves is really funny, especially if the killing blow is the only time one of them lands a hit on the other intentionally. It is open to so much silliness, hijinks, and abject failure that I'm all for it. And given what it's going to be up against in the finals, I'm hoping it wins. Hiccup vs Hero is probably the matchup I have the strongest connection to this week. I really like it. I think the theme is simple but cool. It scratches that itch of specific incarnations of characters, as you really couldn't composite these two with their original book counterparts. At least you can't with Hiccup. I don't know if you can composite Hero with the original Marvel comic, but I've read the How to Train Your Dragon books. You cannot combine those two Hiccups, and especially those two Toothlesses together. Book Toothless is a baby kaiju. He is a baby version of like the big dragon that shows up in the original How to Train Your Dragon movie at the end. It'd be a cool high-flying 3D animation between two sets of best friends in a technology versus magic matchup. And given Hiccup is kind of a nerd when it comes to mechanics, I'd love to see his reactions to the sheer insanity of Baymax's complicated mechanisms compared to the technology of his time. It's a really cool matchup. Sackboy vs Maxwell is like, yeah, it's like, you know, it's the Larryl matchup, lads! One of the most creatively free matchups in the entirety of the tournament. I don't actually know, like, whatever full connection list there is, because I haven't played either games, but I think I get the gist just on a glance. I'd adore this matchup happening, both for Larrywinwood and because I think it has the most creative potential than over any matchup in this whole tournament. It's a great one. Week 5 gave us the return of Kratos vs Azura from last year, Homer from The Simpsons vs Peter Griffin from Family Guy, Jimmy Neutron vs Dexter Laboratory, and Naruto vs Luffy. Wow, Kratos vs Azura again. So I've made it no secret that I don't care for this matchup. And this time I can ignore the people harassing me because, like, it's mostly just over me liking Kratos Dante as opposed to specifically me not liking Kratos Azura. And the group has kind of died down, so, yeah. Thematically, I think the matchup's fine. Though I think people who argue it's infinitely thematically better than Kratos vs. Dante sound really stupid when you think about Kratos Dante for too long. It's more so just that it's more obviously thematic as opposed to actually more thematic. I think animation-wise, it doesn't work for me that much though. There's a reason people think Azura god stomps Kratos. It's because he's on a scale where he's tanking galaxies being thrown at his face, while Kratos' highest scale is a guy weaker than him stopping a city-sized sword. I'm just not too interested in it as a fight. I think that seeing Kratos in a fight at such high scale not only goes against literally what the creators of God of War intended, having admitted that Kratos is extremely strong but they tone it down in the game, but it also doesn't reflect his character very well. And downplaying Azura, on the other hand, just makes me wonder what the point of using him is. If you're fine with Kratos going cosmic, that's cool, but I'm just not. It's like the whole idea of seeing Batman, whose stats are multi-city block at least, actually punching an entire city block to dust. Like, yeah, it conforms with his versus stats, but not really with his character. That's what Kratos going cosmic is to me. It does work with his versus stats, but not really with his character. I think people accept them more because it's cool or whatever, but I love the God of War games, including the 2 new ones, but this matchup doesn't tickle me. I also think it'd be really fucking lame if the special Golden Boy won this tournament. We get 32 matchups, and the winner is not one of the 31 fresh ideas, but a recycled one from last year. In which case, I can't really explain it, but it does kind of make Kolex's win feel less special. It's like, it's not even the only one in its poll that ended up becoming an episode by a winning. Because if Kratos Azura happened naturally, it'd be less bothersome, because it'd be like, okay, Kolex got the special forward treatment, while Kratos Azura is just like, it got 1 year delay. And like, that'd be like, okay. And why would you even vote for this matchup? It's blatantly obvious the team likes it. They put it on twice. God of War will never stop being relevant or having new games. When the next one comes out, they'd almost certainly do this anyway. This is one of the biggest examples of a matchup that didn't need to be here, because I'm certain that if it wasn't, it still would have happened. Homer vs. Peter then is easily my favorite of this lot. I have no strong connection to either series, if I'm to be honest. I didn't really watch Simpsons when it was on, or I guess it's still on, or Family Guy, and I haven't started. But the rivalry these series have is too palpable. While they did have a crossover where they did fight, I honestly think that it didn't show off the majority of its stuff from what I remember. And I think seeing them actually go at it with all their shit from across all their media would be really cool. If Peter uses the lightsaber cheese knife in the episode, I'd scream in pure joy. I think the cutaway gag potential for once is also really standout. They'd have so many ways to make it funny. As long as the joke isn't a purposely bad joke followed by, well, that wasn't much funny. Like, I guess that joke would work. As long as they didn't over-exaggerate, like, wow, that joke wasn't funny! Or paste it too slowly. I think they could make it good, I think they could even make that joke good enough, actually, yeah. I'd love to see the versus side too. There's a lot of media for these two, so I'd be really interested to see where they end up, and what they get. Mostly I'd love to learn, and I'd love to see one of the biggest modern cartoon rivalries come to be. Modern. That's not the right word! Simpsons was what, 89? Yeah, I think it was 89. Jimmy vs. Dexter then. My friends like it, but I don't feel strongly about it. I didn't watch either series. I'd be interested to see how they animate it though. Then there's Naruto vs. Luffy, which in some way almost takes the crown of least necessary back from Kratos vs. Azura. Because if this matchup was to happen, this massive matchup that is admittedly more on the casual side than the hardcore side, which is probably why it lost here, it should happen like naturally. I don't really like it, but I don't feel particularly strongly one way or another. I just think it's kind of lame to feed the other big three member to Naruto after you already butchered one. Also, one of my close friends doesn't like it and prefers Natsu vs. Luffy, which hey, I do too because Fairy Tail. Week 6 gave us Lucina from Fire Emblem vs. Grovyle from Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, X from Mega Man vs. Optimus Primal from Transformers, Percy Jackson from the Ryodenverse, I think it's called, vs. Zagreus from Hades, and Scott Pilgrim vs. Kazuma. Lucina vs. Grovyle is pretty sweet. It's not my preferred for Lucina, because I just love the aesthetic vibe of Siri, but I can't say I dislike it. I love Gen 3, it's my favorite Pokemon generation, and Grovyle is a really sick Pokemon. Easily the coolest middle evolution starter. And going for a specific character from Mystery Dungeon is really sick, along with the novelty of a middle evolution that isn't Pikachu. Thematically, I think it has to do with them being time travelers, which is a fun way to go about it too. It'd definitely be a unique fight visually. I'm not sure if the aesthetic works that well. I'm not versed in Fire Emblem at all. I don't really know for sure if Groval can speak English or not either. I haven't played any games with this specific character, but it is Mystery Dungeon, so he could easily speak English. I mean, it's cool though, and it's a Generation 3 Pokemon matchup. X vs Primal is a great matchup. I never want to see Transformers on Death Battle ever again. Going 2 weeks unable to have any fun with my favorite franchise ever is pure torture. I hate it. And I already know a bunch of people have mocked me for allowing other people's actions to affect my opinions, but like, first of all, if being endlessly harassed doesn't affect you at all, I'm pretty sure that makes you more weird than otherwise. And second of all, you don't get exposed to as much of it as I do, I'm certain. Fuck off. Popularity is not entirely a good thing. Pretty sure people will just go, oh well, if you don't want this, you shouldn't do videos. It's like, shut the fuck up. I'm making because I'm having fun doing it. It gets under my skin, but it's not a huge deal. In fact, I only bring it up when it's relevant, and it's relevant here. You're not going to see me complain about this sort of shit when a Transformers matchup is not relatively the topic, okay? Do you want me to just lie about my opinion? I could do that too. Plus, the amount of people that actually get under my skin is way less than the amount of people who try. Percy Jackson vs. Zagreus, I don't have strong opinions on. From what I've seen, it's neat, and definitely got shat on a bit too much for not being Pit vs. Zagreus. I'm not too strongly opinionated, but it seems neat. I actually really like the aesthetic from what I've seen, but hey, it's better than Percy vs. Harry. Fucking gonna put Harry in a death battle against another swordsman, but this is a swordsman who doesn't even have the space magic. I don't like Scott vs. Kazuma though, but given the amount of shit that fans of this matchup got during the week this was on the poll, I'm gonna actually avoid shitting on it further. I don't actually have a big problem with the matchup, like, as a matchup. I just don't like Kazuma. Like, that's really all it is. I don't like Kazuma. He's a pervert, and I just don't find him enjoyable when half of his jokes are perversion or being a dick douchebag. Plus, he has the collar episode, which is one of the worst things I've ever watched. Not a single episode of Ruby has ever displeased me as much as the collar OVA of Konosuba. Week 7, the penultimate one. It gave us Spike from Cowboy Bebop vs. Revy from Black Lagoon, Hulk from Marvel vs. Toho's Godzilla, She from Disney vs. Xehanort from Disney, and Ellie from The Last of Us vs. Clementine from The Walking Dead. Spike vs. Revy is cool. I haven't seen either series, but several people I know really love the matchup, and I would have loved if it had won and allowed DJ to cook for an entire episode. Plus, it has a vibe to it, like, I don't know, I get like a grungy street brawl sort of vibe, which may be totally off because I haven't seen either series, but if it's accurate, then that would be really cool, because it gives it a unique draw. Plus, like, Revy's hair is purple, and I mean, what more could I want? Hulk vs. Godzilla is the lamest matchup of this entire list. 2 returning characters, one who came back only 3 seasons prior from having already been on the show before even that. And they don't need to come back. And yes, they are indeed strong things that are radioactive, and turns out they have some connection to, like, ultra-dimensional bullshit. I even animated a version of this fight, and I can't say I'm exactly interested to see it. It's a creature so big that his opponent doesn't even come up to his ankle, and I don't know, the animation there isn't there for me. They go boom, boom, smack, smack, but I don't know, it's hard to explain, because I did animate this myself, but having animated it and put my all into it, I can also see the problems with my own animation, and there are a lot of things that I couldn't avoid as problems, and I don't know, it's just like, also with a composite Godzilla, he has so many more powers than Hulk, it's ridiculous. I don't know, it's a lame matchup, and if it had to happen, I'd be happiest if it was not connected to a vote like this. I don't need the Tournament of Champions being used for, like, 2 returning characters in the most casual matchup ever. Kinda like Palpatine vs. Xehanort, though I do like this matchup and I think it's neat. I just don't think the tournament needed to be used for 2 returning franchises who already fought one another. That said, if this happened in the future, I'd be fine. The fact that it already has a DBX really only would have bothered me if it won the tournament, and letting Liam come back as Shiva again would be really fun. And Ellie vs. Clementine is a matchup that I think is really cool, but I'm not sure on how much I want to see it. Like, thematically it's really cool, and aesthetically it's basically flawless. 2 kids in a not zombie apocalypse accompanied by a cool survivor guy who then dies and they have to carry on after that. Like, that's pretty cool, and the fact that it's so grounded works really well for me too. I just don't know how much I want to see 2 kids this realistic and full of trauma brutally killing one another. Like, at least with, like, I don't know, like with Ben 10, there's like a sense of disconnect because he is like a superhero guy with like all these wacky powers and all that shit, but like, I don't know how you end this one without it being sad. Do you have one of them just shoot the other? Do you have them leave them behind in a pit of zombies and not show the kill directly, but just hear the dying screams? Do you have it be a mercy kill after one of them gets bitten, which in Ellie's case has to be by a walker because it couldn't be one of the clickers or anything? I don't know. I think it'd be a cool fight. I just don't know how you do the ending well. Well, okay, you can do it well. I mean, like, not depressingly sad. Then there's the final week, giving us Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street versus Pennywise from It, Skeletor from Master of the Universe versus Lord Z from Power Rangers, Sansy Wansy from Undertale versus Pablo from Off, and the Grinch from Dr. Seuss versus Jack Skellington. While not having any standout matchups to me, this is actually my favorite lineup overall. Freddy vs. Pennywise is actually pretty cool. Looking back, I'm not super hyped for it, but I've come to dislike it a lot less as time's gone on. I think it has a ton of potential, especially if Freddy uses infinitygauntlet.jpg to snap away Pennywise.png, and I think it'd be extremely fun to see them play off each other. Galaxy Video Max editing on Death Battle now also means I get to see him go off on this matchup a second and better time. I like Freddy a lot as well, like as a character, and Pennywise suffering the fate of nerfs is going to be pretty fun to watch as well as the waiting period goes on. I have no strong connection to Masters of the Universe or Power Rangers, but man do I think Skeletor vs. Lord Zed is fucking cool. With a caveat though. I don't want this to play out like He-Man vs. Lion-O, where it's just them being silly. As much as I love the silliness, and Skeletor's playground level insults with Mumra is a highlight of the official He-Man vs. Thundercats crossover, I only want it to start like that. Start us with the silliness and the goofy playfulness, but have it transition to them being genuine cosmic horror monsters, pure evil. That transition is what I'm craving for with this. Not just cartoon Skeletor and Zed in the later seasons where he's a goofball, but giving us them overall, including their most evil and villainous. It would be insane. I'd love it. Sans vs. the Judge is the one that I want to win this whole thing. This hits all the notes I would have wanted from this tournament, and for a second, gave me hope that this tournament would go the way I wanted. A unique and unusual matchup with underused media in the form of indie games that's popular enough to get some views, but past the peak of its popularity, so no longer quite relevant enough for Death Battle to do it naturally, and one that, if doing well, would open the floodgates to more indie games on Death Battle. But then, it's gonna lose to Kratos Azura of all fucking matchups now, because people don't want uniqueness. Now, I don't think Kratos Azura fans deserve the matchup after all they've done. They didn't do anything, they just requested it, got it on the list, and then voted. I was part of a campaign for Colex, and I don't think we deserved it to win. It's just like it did win, because it worked. Kratos Azura fans are going to get the matchup whether it wins now or not. Sans vs. Judge is really fucking cool. I don't necessarily know the theme behind it, to be honest, but aesthetically it vibes fucking well, and I think Judge's gimmick is quite interesting here. And Grinch vs. Jack. It's cool. We don't have a dedicated Christmas episode, our closest is literally Homelander vs. Omni-Man, but this would be a prime specimen for a full stop-motion episode, which would be insanely cool. I'm actually curious how this would play out too. I'd love to see it someday, even though I have no personal connection to it. So that's all 32 matchups. Have I ever mentioned that I can't draw for shit? Okay, bye, I gotta get back to work now. Go vote for Tom vs. Wiley.